Inside of today's video, we're investigating over 15 elites from society who associated with Epstein in those negative ways that you're thinking about that were never punished for their crimes. Resignation is not enough of a punishment for what these people did. We're going to dive in, take a look at each of their stories, and see just how, so far, they've continued to get away with what they did in their past.
One thing is for sure when it comes to the Epstein files. There is fallout. After the release of millions and millions of pages of materials and videos and photographs, people have come under a lot of fire, and their careers, their reputations, they are taking a hit. And you even see criminal investigations happening right now. And that's interesting to think about, right? Because there have always been calls for accountability, calls for justice, calls for transparency. And you have to think that if there hadn't been calls to release the files and to keep this in the public spotlight, where you just had the DOJ and FBI's memo from last summer, where it basically said there's no client list, there's no other third parties, there's nothing really else there, would we even see what's happening right now? And I'm not justifying it. We'll talk about it at the end, whether or not it's justified. Was that going to be the end of the story? Clearly not. So I want to examine the fallout from the Epstein saga right now. I'm going to start with the criminal one. You got Norway's former prime minister, Torbjørn Jagland. He has been charged with aggravated corruption after authorities looked into his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, the deceased financier. You see, according to the New York Times, this is serious. He could face up to 10 years in prison. And investigators say they are probing, quote, whether gifts, travel, and loans were received in connection with his position. And he had served as prime minister from 1996 to 1997, foreign minister and secretary general of the Council of Europe at one point. So investigators, they even searched his home, 2 other properties. I mean, this is big. Again, it came out because of the release of these files.
Now, the funny thing here that's actually kind of sad is the biggest penalties, or I should say the biggest risk of penalties, are actually for people who are not inside of the United States. We're talking about the prime minister here. He is not a U.S. citizen, yet he's seeing probably some of the largest consequences that we're going to hear about in this entire video, while most others are getting away with it with not even a slap of the wrist. You're not going to believe some of the names that you're going to see in this video, some of the crimes that they've commit, and the lack of punishment for those actions.
Now, he has denied all wrongdoing, but this is the first time in Norway since the end of World War II that a former prime minister has faced criminal charges. So what do the files say? Okay, you got June 2012. Jagland writes to Epstein, "Hi, Jeffrey. I tried to call you the other day, knowing that you were in Paris. I would have loved to see you. Tara and I spoke about you when we were in Luxembourg, agreeing that you are a fabulous person, easy, and at the same time demanding to be together with. Torbjørn." By the way, that reference was to Tara Larsen. I might be mispronouncing the name. Former Norwegian politician. He has been accused of being Epstein associate as well. And I want you to remember something as we're going through these communications like 2012. This is after Jeffrey Epstein's conviction on Florida state charges of soliciting a minor for prostitution. That is what elevates that. That is why you are seeing a lot of this fallout, is that you were in communication with somebody who pled guilty to that. And speaking of which, what about this one from 2012? "Hi, Jeffrey. No, I haven't called yet. I have been in Tirana, Albania. Extraordinary girls." 2013. By the way, Han and I have talked about coming back to somewhere in the Caribbean with my 2 sons during Easter, or I think it's Easter, to celebrate 60th birthday. I can't keep it going only with young women, as you know. September 14th, 2018. So this is the year before Jeffrey Epstein was ultimately arrested on child trafficking charges, the federal charges. You have an email from Epstein's assistant to Jagland. Subject, Jeffrey Epstein, apartments 2G and 10B, September 22nd to the 29th. "Hello, Jagland. I wanted to reconfirm your apartment stay, September 22nd to the 29th. You will have 2 apartments, 2G and 10B. We will have a welcome letter for you with the doorman upon your arrival. Please do confirm back and let me know if there's anything else we can do." There's an email showing that Jagland's wife and adult children seemingly stayed in Palm Beach, Florida in 2014, and it was paid for with Epstein's credit card. So you can see why they're looking at what was he receiving, what was he giving. I mean, Jagland at one point apparently stayed at Epstein's homes in New York and Miami, visited his private island in the Caribbean. This is apparently according to the emails. And in the email chain between, you have a few people here, the subject says, Yaglan hotel rooms. It says things like, all I know is J.E. wants to bring to the island Torbern Jagland, his 3 kids and girlfriend, to PB and then on to the island.
It sounds like they do have quite the relationship here. There's so much evidence and proof of these connections, hotel stays, ongoing conversations about girls, bringing family and friends. This seems like a very deep connection that's pretty hard to scoot out from underneath.
If we can use his personal card, call me and I will give you the info. I have it. Now, the New York Times reports that Epstein would introduce Jagland to his associates, including Kathryn Ruemmler, the former White House counsel under President Barack Obama, who we're going to talk about a little bit more in a minute. And in exchange, he allegedly wanted Jagland to get him a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So there's a lot of notable exchanges, including where Epstein wrote this to Jagland. I think you might suggest to Putin that Lavrov can get insight on talking to me. So you can see, again, why this investigation is happening. Moving on, let's talk about Thomas Pritzker, who served as the chairman of Hyatt Hotels, held that position for 20 years.
Wow.
Problem for him? His communication with Epstein, again, after Epstein's conviction. You got this one from Pritzker to Epstein. I'm in a remote valley of Afghanistan. It's my birthday wish with boys with toys. Spend time with Petraeus, seemingly General Petraeus, yesterday, and he loaned me a chopper, actually 2, with 1 as backup. April 2018. So this is the year again before Epstein's arrest on federal child trafficking charges, all the way up until then. You have an Epstein associate, his alleged girlfriend, we've talked about her before, Karina Shuliak, who he apparently, by the way, Epstein wanted to leave the mass of his fortune and his properties to upon his death.
She was the dentist as well, I believe. The one who was practicing dental activities on people that were visiting the island, or maybe some of the women who were there for unwanted extended stays.
Wrote to Pritzker, going to try to find a new girlfriend for Jeffrey. Pritzker apparently writes back with a smiley face, may the force be with you. July 2015, Epstein to Pritzker. Would you find it amusing to have Dalai Lama meet Woody Allen for lunch on Saturday? Could be a memorable event. Pritzker writes back, can't do it, we'll explain. Pritzker resigned as Hyatt executive chairman, and he released a statement saying, good stewardship also means protecting Hyatt, particularly in the context of my association with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, which I deeply regret. I exercised terrible judgment in maintaining contact with them, and there is no excuse for failing to distance myself sooner.
Yeah, and I think the biggest part of all this is, it's one thing to associate with someone that's done all of these crimes before they've been convicted, before the world knew about the crimes. But to be caught having in-depth conversations, or even further beyond that, friendships with someone that had served time in prison, that had been accused of all of these crimes, and you still make the decision to participate in conversation, gatherings, get-togethers, and friendships with Jeffrey Epstein, it just shows that you were either a part of that or you were okay with Jeffrey Epstein leading that lifestyle.
Again, just something I have to put in. What people's knowledge of what Epstein and Maxwell were up to, not on its face entirely clear, but the association, again, after Epstein's conviction, and particularly going right up until when he was arrested again, that is what's concerning, okay? And I'm not saying that everything we're going through would justify a further investigation or justify criminal charges, but you'll be the one to decide whether or not this punishment we're seeing, these resignations, these career torpedoing emails and communications, is it justified? You'll be the judge of that. Got to talk about Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, okay? Resigned as CEO of DP World. This is Dubai's largest port operator. Doesn't help when you have this email, June 2013, from Epstein to bin Sulayem. All I know for sure is that you are one of my most trusted friends in every sense of the word. You have never let me down, not once, not half of once, and I greatly appreciate the time we spend together. This was the response. Thank you, my friend. I am off the sample, a fresh 100% female Russian at my yacht.
Wow.
Epstein responds, 100% Russian or 100% female? Question, if it were once a man and now has, and describes women's private parts, what percentage is it? And bin Sulayem responds, 100% female. Yeah, the messages between the two discuss women, girls, sexually explicit content, business dealings for sure, meetings with world leaders, yeah. And then the torture video. Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video.
There's no getting out from under these. These things clearly lay out what's being not only discussed, but what's actually happening between these two. It's crazy to think. And these are now outside of the United States that very little has been done.
Epstein apparently sent that message in April 2009 to a redacted name, but then you had Representative Thomas Massie, who's been all over this, revealed that this was sent to assault him. And then you had Deputy AG, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who seemed to indicate that it was linked to bin Sulayem. This is according to CNN. No idea what that torture video is. There is a correspondence also where bin Sulayem shared links to pornography sites with Epstein during a family trip to the U.S. with his wife and kids. There's this one, September 30th, 2015, an email from bin Sulayem to Epstein. This girl is Russian. Father Cypriot. Mom, I met her 2 years ago. She goes to the American University in Dubai. She got engaged, but now she back with me. The best sex I ever had. Amazing body.
This is some of the most unredacted stuff, the most straightforward conversation. There's zero question that things were going on here. The only question that we have is, what was the age of that girl?
This one caught eyeballs. Dear Fetra, attached is passport copy of redacted. She works as the personal masseuse at the private spa of our friend Jeffrey Epstein. I would appreciate if you can arrange for her to work as a trainee at Rixos Antalya Spa so she gains better experiences. Yours, Sultan bin Sulayem. The allegation being that he helped train Epstein's masseuse. Look, anytime you hear Epstein and massages, you got to stop for a moment, considering he was accused of using massages as a way to not only begin the abuse of girls, but it was a conduit to escalate the abuse. I mentioned Kathryn Ruemmler. Okay, chief legal officer and general counsel at Goldman Sachs. Guess what? She resigned. Yeah, these two are apparently close. According to the Wall Street Journal, Epstein called her when he was arrested in 2019. She once thanked Epstein after receiving luxury gifts from him, calling him Uncle Jeffrey. See, the issue there is she seemed to indicate that her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was strictly professional. Let's see what the files seem to show. I'm totally tricked out by Uncle Jeffrey today. Jeffrey boots, handbag, and watch. February 2016, Epstein to Ruemmler. We all set for a day of joy? Ruemmler to Epstein. Best massage ever, but not your kind of massage. Epstein writes back, shame. May 2015, Epstein writes, if redacted continues to claim that she had sex with people for money, why is that not prostitution and what I pled guilty to? Every massage person got paid money. No girl came to the house to learn math. Does for money change the equation? There was a massage person per day. Some turned out to be younger than others, some as old as 60. I'll explain when I see you. Ruemmler seems to respond, I think the point is that if she was underage, she cannot legally consent to engaging in prostitution. They would also discuss politics and Donald Trump, her even calling Trump at one point truly stupid. There's this interesting email in 2016 regarding Bill Clinton, where Epstein writes, my memory is a friend killer. I stopped talking to Clinton when he swore with wholehearted conviction to me that he had done something. He had forgotten that he also swore the exact opposite to me only weeks before. Speaking of Clinton, by the way, there's this one where Epstein writes, do you think Bill Clinton would like to join you, me, Ehud, and Steve? Could be very funny, all off the record. Ruemmler responds, while he might like to, his lawyer would advise him against it.
All right, so she's clearly knowing what's going on here with Epstein. I think this is a good example because, yes, we see some females in the Epstein files, some of which are just happen to be mentioned inside of there, some of which that are females that are bringing other girls to Epstein, basically being the recruits, others that are engaging in different events that may have happened on Epstein Island and in his other suites, and then ones like this that maybe are in a business sense, but knowing the type of risky, illegal business that's actually going on. So a nice diverse variety of how women are also involved and responsible for some of the things that went on regarding the Epstein files.
Ruemmler told the Wall Street Journal, as I have said, I regret ever knowing him, and I have enormous sympathy for the victims of Epstein's crimes. And she also added through a representative in another statement, I had no knowledge of any ongoing criminal conduct on his part, and I did not know him as the monster he has been revealed to be. What about Casey Wasserman, founder, chairman, CEO of Wasserman Talent Agency? Major agency, represents all kinds of athletes, performers, musicians. Chairman, by the way, of the Los Angeles 28 Olympics, the Paralympic Games. So he began selling his company in the wake of the Epstein files, and he lost clients like singer Chappell Roan and soccer star Abby Wambach. The LA mayor now saying he should step down from the 2028 Olympic Games. See, the issue with him is that I think the argument was it seemed at one point the extent of his connection was a humanitarian trip that he took with Epstein and Bill Clinton and Maxwell. But there was more that came out. Really, these kind of arguably flirty and suggestive messages and emails with Ghislaine Maxwell 20 years ago. Yes, years before she was ultimately convicted of being a child trafficker, but still toxic. Like this one from back in 2003 when he was reportedly married with a family, writing Maxwell, "I think of you all the time. So what do I have to do to see you in a tight leather outfit? I am in New York tonight. You're not. What am I to do?" How about this one from Wasserman to Maxwell? "I will be in New York City for 4 days starting April 22nd. Can we book that massage now?"
Wow, okay, whether that's a massage from Maxwell or for some of the girls that she had brought into the equation, either way, not looking good for him.
Maxwell at one point responds, all that rubbing, are you sure you can take it? The thought, frankly, is leaving me a little breathless. There are a few spots that apparently drive a man wild. I suppose I could practice them on you and you could let me know if they work or not.
Very clear that she's talking about herself performing the massage and not any other girls, unless if they were also involved.
In a memo to his employees, Mr. Wasserman wrote that he only had limited interactions with Maxwell and Epstein, but that he had become a distraction, adding it was years before their criminal conduct came to light, and in its entirety consisted of one humanitarian trip to Africa and a handful of emails that I deeply regret sending. The pain experienced by the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell is unimaginable, and I'm glad, as I'm sure you all are, that those who helped them commit their crimes are rightly being held accountable.
That trip to Africa is probably the same trip to Africa that we've seen many other people on the flight, including Bill Clinton was part of that flight as well, if it's the same Africa humanitarian trip.
So that becomes one, it's interesting, where you think about, should he have had to step down, considering this was before the convictions, before all this came to light. Peter Mandelson, UK ambassador to the United States. So Mandelson was fired by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. This is back in September, and he resigned from the Labour Party a few weeks ago because of his Epstein connection. Kind of give you an idea, you have this exchange from 2009 allegedly surrounds Epstein's release from prison after serving 13 of his 18-month sentence on what I mentioned before, the charges of solicitation of prostitution of a minor. So here's how that went. So this is from Jeffrey Epstein, okay, July 22nd, 2009. He writes, "Free and home." So you have this response, "How shall we celebrate?" Again, from allegedly Peter Mandelson. Jeffrey Epstein seems to respond with "grace and modesty." Those are the names of two strippers.
All right, so this is after he gets out of prison. Clearly, from this point on, everyone that he associates with since 2008 knows what he was in jail for, knows what he's been doing, and anyone that associates with him from 2008 and beyond does so with full knowledge of the monster that Jeffrey Epstein is.
This is a response allegedly from Mandelson. "How is Freedom feeling?" Epstein responds, "She feels fresh, firm, and creamy." And Mandelson allegedly writes to Jeffrey Epstein, "Naughty boy." But also you now have the Metropolitan Police who have launched an investigation into Mandelson for allegedly providing Epstein with market-sensitive information when he was acting as business secretary in the British government back in 2009. Yeah, The Guardian reporting that 2 of his properties have been searched. So for example, you have this email from June 2009 where Mandelson appears to write to Epstein, "Interesting note that's gone to the PM," meaning the Prime Minister. So it appears to be a note sent to the Prime Minister about business issues and plan of action, including the sale of assets. And Epstein writes back, "What saleable assets?" Or how about this one, where Mandelson allegedly gave Epstein a heads up that a 500 billion euro bailout had been agreed to tackle the Eurozone crisis. You can see the issue. Last year, Mandelson said to the Financial Times, "I regret ever meeting him or being introduced to him by his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. I regret even more the hurt he caused to many young women."
Another PR put together statement. If you look at all of these, they all look very similar. "I regret ever knowing him. I regret that I participated in any conversations with him. And I feel terribly about the young women that have had to deal with the outcomes of his abuse." Same repeated story from every single person, the same statement, and it gets old.
Brad Karp resigned as chairman of mega house law firm Paul Weiss. Got this 2015 email where he thanked Epstein for a once-in-a-lifetime evening. Or you have this correspondence where he connected his son David to Jeffrey Epstein to try to help David get a job on a Woody Allen film in 2016. What about Professor David Galenter? He was banned from teaching classes at Yale University. He's now being investigated by the university.
Banned. Resigned. These are the types of things that are happening to people. Investigated. We have yet to hear put behind bars, or we have yet to hear anything substantial for a punishment for the actions that took place between everyone that we've so far seen inside of this video, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. There's only two people that ever saw punishment from this, and it is those two. Everyone else so far to this day has gone scot-free. Do you think a resignation, or do you think a being banned from teaching is a punishment enough for the crimes that many of these people commit or were a part of, or in some way added fuel to the fire of? I'd like to know what you think.
Stuff like this when Galenter recommended a woman for a project to Epstein in 2011. I have a perfect editorialist in mind. Yale senior, worked at Vogue last summer, runs her own campus mag, art major, completely connected, very small, good-looking blonde.
Wow. I mean, the credentials are great, talking about what they did, where they worked, what they do for their profession. But why a very small, good-looking blonde? Like, why does it have to get into the physical? And the answer is, we know why.
Mona Jewel, Norwegian ambassador, seemed to resign due to her connection to Epstein, particularly being written into his will at one point.
Wow.
Miroslav Lajcik, national security advisor to the Prime Minister of Slovakia, former president of the UN General Assembly, resigned after messages came out with him and Epstein. David Ross, chair of New York's School of Visual Arts, resigned. He even allegedly called Epstein incredible after there was a suggestion of there being an exhibit featuring minor boys. Joanna Rubinstein, chair of Sweden for the UN Refugee Agency, she announced her resignation on February 2nd after there were documents seemingly showed that she had this 2012 family visit to Epstein's private island. Larry Summers, we've talked about him before, stepping away from his teaching duties at Harvard and acting as a board member at OpenAI. It wasn't just that he was named backup executor of an earlier version of Epstein's will. No, it appears that Summers reportedly visited Jeffrey Epstein's island. There were flight records as part of a lawsuit that revealed that he had traveled on Epstein's plane multiple times.
Could you imagine sending your child to a university such as Harvard to then find out that someone that is in such big control of the university is actually involved in Epstein-related crimes? I don't even know how to address that. The expense, the trust you put in a college to care for your children, to then find out that you're putting them in the hands of a monster is actually kind of unbelievable.
Like where Summers says, I don't want to be in a gift-giving competition while being the friend without benefits. Or when Summers wrote, I said, what are you up to? She said, I'm busy. I said, awfully coy you are. Epstein responds, she's smart, making you pay for past errors. Ignore the daddy, I'm going to go out with the motorcycle guy. You reacted well. Annoyed shows caring. No whining showed strength. So seemingly getting relationship or dating advice or whatever you call it from Epstein. He came out with a statement, I'm deeply ashamed of my actions and recognize the pain they have caused. I take full responsibility for my misguided decision to continue communicating with Mr. Epstein.
Saying that once he realized what he actually was, Epstein being a monster after his conviction, he's sorry that he then continued to speak with him knowing those things.
Peter Attia, the anti-aging influencer, recently appointed contributor at CBS News, was mentioned almost 2,000 times in the Epstein files. Tia wrote in one email to Epstein in February of 2016 that a woman's private parts were low carb, adding, still waiting results on gluten content though. You have an email from June 24, 2015 with the subject line, got a fresh shipment, where Tia seemingly writes, the biggest problem with becoming friends with you, the life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I can't tell a soul.
And notice on this email right here, got a fresh shipment. Obviously, they're talking about young women. There is an image file there as well. You could see .jpg. Unfortunately, we can't see that file, but I think it's safe to assume that that is an image of a or multiple young women being that new shipment.
Now, Atiyeh came out and said, reading that exchange now is very embarrassing and I will not defend it. I'm ashamed of myself for everything about this. At the time, I understood this exchange as juvenile, not a reference to anything dark or harmful. He added that he was never on Epstein's plane, never on his island, never present in any parties. But Atiyeh did step down from his role as the chief science officer at the snack bar company David Protein. And then there was a 60-minute segment that he was featured on that was reportedly pulled. He reportedly has been retained by CBS, though. What about the NFL investigating Steve Tisch, chairman, co-owner of the New York Giants, named over 400 times in the Epstein files? Because you have messages like this, where Tisch seemingly wrote to Epstein that he was, quote, curious to know about a woman, asked Epstein, is she a pro or civilian? Epstein actually replied that he doesn't like records of these conversations.
Strange.
Tisch apparently asked Epstein in another email about a different woman, is she fun? With Epstein replying she is a civilian but Russian and rarely tells the full truth, but fun. This one's pretty striking. Regarding Tisch meeting up with a woman, Epstein writes to him, you did very well. She is a little freaked by the age difference, but go slow. Now, in a January statement to ESPN, Tisch said, we had a brief association where we exchanged emails about adult women. In addition, we discussed movies, philanthropy, and investments. I did not take him up on any of his invitations and never went to his island. As we all know now, he was a terrible person and someone I deeply regret associating with.
I think he probably knew back then that he was also a terrible person based off of the emails that were going around. And I think it's interesting that he says right here, adult women, trying to right off the bat nip in the bud any discussion about juvenile young girls, trying to make it known that they were adult women, which kind of leads you to believe that maybe he's covering up the actual truth.
And look, I don't even have to mention Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, being stripped of his titles, even now being investigated out in the UK over his relationship and correspondence with Epstein. We've already talked about that in a full episode of Sidebar where we talked about the royals' connection to Epstein. I mean, the photo of him on all fours hovering over a woman on the ground, pretty bad. Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, former Duchess of York, her charity, Sarah's Trust, announced on February 2nd, it's shutting down. I mean, one thing to keep in mind with her, there was correspondence between her and Epstein where she said he was always the brother I've always wished for.
Wow.
Congratulated him on one point on having a child. Yeah, there was that whole secret child allegations. By the way, Ferguson had also at one point called Virginia Giuffre's claim that she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew a salacious lie. She said that in a TV interview. The Clintons, they're going to testify in front of Congress because of Bill's photos with Epstein. You know, remember the famous pool photo that came out?
Now, they did testify, and my question is, why the Clintons? Out of all the people, out of everyone, how come the Clintons were singled out? Now, I'm not saying that the Clintons shouldn't have had to go speak out in court about what happened, about what went on, but why just them? That's the big question here. Why aren't others that are currently holding office pulled in to have discussion? And I'm not just talking about the president, but anyone else that was associated, that had their names in the files and that had their pictures postered everywhere with Jeffrey Epstein. That's something I'm just not sure of, and I don't know why they're just honing in on the Clintons.
Took trips on Epstein's plane. Leon Black, investor, former CEO of Apollo Global Management. We've talked about him too. He left Apollo in 2021, said it was health issues, but remember, a lot of questions came up about his relationship with Epstein. One of the things that came up in the Epstein files was communications about the two, like this one. Leon Black will come see J.E. tomorrow at 10 a.m. He may want breakfast. Please be prepared. There were also allegations that were very dark. Allegations that Leon Black is a rapist. You have an email where it says, got a call from victim woman who said that she heard about lawsuit against Black. Victim said Black her around 20 years ago, 2001 or 2002, in Epstein's townhouse. Victim described it, felt pain on massage table with head on floor and legs on his shoulders, excruciating. Spoke with redacted at Manhattan DA's office, substance abuse problems in 1990s, preyed on by Epstein, gave massages to Epstein and Black for money. Give another claim. Minor victim at Epstein's townhouse and was told to give Leon Black a massage, violently raped by Black, 16 years old, when raped by Black. So look, that is a sampling of the fallout we're seeing right now. There is probably going to be more. It's a question for you out there about whether each and every person I mentioned, is it justified or not, that their careers are over, their reputation tarnished?
But is their career being over and their reputation tarnished enough? There's no jail time. There's no sentencing. There's no anything relating to the law, minus them losing their credentials, their jobs, and I guess a bit of their self-dignity. How many of the names from today's list were a surprise to you? Let me know in the comments section below, and while you're down there, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's video. And if you want to see more, why don't you check out this one, because it's right along the same storyline and I think you'll enjoy it. I'll see you guys over there.